I've been gaming for a long time, and over the course of my life, I've played every single entry in several gaming franchises. Some franchises stand out more than others, and some hit a higher standard of quality than others in a more consistent fashion. You're watching Rayl Deal Games, and in this Rayl Deal Gaming video, I'll be ranking my top 10 gaming franchises of all time. I make new gaming videos every single Friday, and if you like the franchises I talk about in this video, this is the channel for you. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe so that you don't miss out on all those future videos. With that established, let's dive right in. Number 10. Mega Man X is the first game I've ever played, and with this franchise, Capcom created a wholly unique sort of side-scrolling platformer. There's nothing quite like Mega Man in terms of its gameplay loop, and it's not surprising that this franchise has several spin-off series. My favorite ones are the mainline series and X Continuity, as each are full of simply excellent games. Mega Man rounds out the bottom of this list because I haven't played all of the games in it. And my number 10 here was almost the Crash Bandicoot series. I put Mega Man above Crash because of its unique design, and Capcom is just in a league of its own in terms of gameplay systems. Of every studio that exists, Capcom builds their games the best in terms of replayability and player expression. Mega Man's X's 1 through 4, 1, 2, and 11 are the games in the series that I've played, and I've enjoyed many of them. 1 and 2 are in my top 100 of the 80s list, X is in my top 25 of the 90s, and while 11 isn't currently on my top 100 of the 2010s, I think when I replay it, it'll get on there no problem. One of my favorite aspects of Mega Man game design is the way the Robot Masters are designed to be beatable in any order. Capcom could have made Mega Man more linear, but even though there is an optimal Robot Master order for each game, the ability of the player to beat any Robot Master with base abilities and no upgrades is genius. My friend and I did a Mega Man X Random Robot Master Challenge run a couple months ago, and it was absolutely fantastic. I have a video on the channel covering that whole process for those of you with an interest in it. There will be a link in the description below if that's something you want to watch. He and I have started our process through the franchise as we want to play each game in the mainline and X series together. My review for X2 is already on the channel, and X's 3 through 5 will be coming later this year. Number 9. BJ Blazkowicz is one of my favorite fictional characters, and he has been ever since Wolfenstein 3D. Wolfenstein 3D is the first FPS game I ever played, but it would be several decades before I'd get around to the other games in the series. In the 2010s, I finally got around to Return to Castle Wolfenstein, the New Order duology, and the Old Blood. Machine Games' version is a great representation of Blazkowicz, and each game in the franchise, other than Youngblood and Cyberpilot, are among the best from their respective decades. I've never played 2009's Wolfenstein or Wolfenstein RPG from 2008, but the former of those doesn't have a ton of fans, and the latter is kinda hard to play these days. I wish id would re-release the RPG games, including the Doom ones, on modern hardware. Even though Youngblood isn't that good, I'm hoping they release another Wolfenstein before the end of this decade. Whenever it does happen, I'm hoping Mecha Hitler is finally brought back as the final boss. Considering his appearance and condition of health in the new Colossus, it wouldn't be surprising if mechanizing him is how he preserves his position and power. I also would love to see the techno-futuristic world of Wolfenstein again, as the new Colossus didn't end the series satisfactorily from a story perspective. There's just nothing better in life than smashing an axe in a legit Nazi's face, and the hellgas look of the enemies is pretty cool, art direction wise. The gameplay of this series being a blend of stealth and high-octane boomer shooter blasting fun makes it unique from anything else in the medium, and it's healthy for the FPS genre to have a variety of gameplay styles. I still do need to do the Mein Leben challenge in Colossus, and whenever I do, I might make a video on it. Number 8. Doomguy and Master Chief owe a lot of their design to their maternal Metroid queen, Samus Aran. Super Metroid is among the first games I ever played in life, and even though it wouldn't be until college that I would beat it and play the back catalog of Metroid games, it always stayed with me. Between the music, art, and gameplay loop, the search action gameplay of the original Metroidvania stands out more in this series than any other. Every single Metroid game I've played currently maintains a place on the top 100 list of their respective decade. There's a couple games in the series I haven't had the chance to play yet, such as Primes 2 and 3, Pinball, Federation Force, Other M, and Metroid 2, and while the spin-offs aren't something I really want to play, the Prime games and the sequel to the original are something I definitely want to get around to at some point. While the Metroid story isn't something I particularly care about, I do like the way these games build atmosphere. That's what set Prime apart when it released in 2002. And part of what makes Super Metroid so memorable is that beginning section aboard the dilapidated space station. The Metroids themselves and X-Parasites are especially memorable. With Dread's release in 2021 and Prime 4's impending release, this franchise is alive and well, and I'm looking forward to what Nintendo does for it in the future. Number 7. There's only a handful of XCOM games, but each are such standouts in the strategy genre that I actually don't need another XCOM game to be happy with the series. I wouldn't be opposed to XCOM 3, but between UFO Defense, Enemy Unknown, and 2, there's enough game to last a lifetime. Permadeath mechanics in strategy games fits extremely well, and my favorite way to play XCOM games is to put all of my friends in the game world and to play out the campaign as if it were a story involving all of them. When one of them dies, it adds to the story generation of the playthrough, and I'll share the story of their death with them whenever I next see them. My friends and I have had a few great laughs about the things their avatars have done in-game, even though none of them have played any of the games in this series. There's a magic in that aspect of XCOM that just doesn't exist anywhere else in the entire history of the gaming industry, which is what makes this franchise stand out so much in comparison to its contemporaries. The base building mechanic and world management mechanics make the whole package something truly special, and uniqueness in gaming is something I value quite highly. Number 6. Doom is my favorite FPS game, and the only games in the series I haven't played are the 2 RPG titles. Just like with my Wolfenstein entry, I really hope it re-releases these games at some point because they look absolutely fantastic. 2016's Doom is my favorite in the series, with 1993's following up in a close second. My first time playing Doom was the DOS shareware version, and for those of you who don't know, this was before computer mouses were used for FPS titles. I played through the whole of Doom using the arrow keys, spacebar, and such to move and shoot. It may sound clunky, but because aiming up and down didn't exist in the original, the control scheme actually worked fairly okay. I'd never trade playing a game with a controller for that older way, but sometimes when I hear people talk about the past, they make this type of game playing sound unplayable, and that's just not the case. I'll definitely be covering the Dark Ages next year, and I'm hoping it eclipses Eternal, which is itself quite good. Whenever that happens, I'll be ranking every game in the franchise. Number 5. Age of Empires 2 is my second favorite game ever made, and if I liked mythology and the first and third games as much, this franchise would be in my number 2 slot. As it stands, I haven't played AoE 4 yet, and AoE 1 and 3 don't quite live up to the series' second sojourn. Even with the low number of games, AoE deserves its place on this list because there is only one other franchise on this list I've spent more in-game hours on, and AoE 2 is my most played individual game of all time. I used to spend a lot of time in the scenario editors for these games, and I would write these long, epic political thrillers using the game's mechanics as a form of storytelling. One day, I'd like to remake that story because I think it could be fun to share that creation with my community, especially since it could be fun to write a story that way with you all. RTS games are a lost breed, but there's nothing quite like its gameplay loop. I especially love AoE in this genre because of my love for history and the way I would RP ancient civilizations through games of AoE. The campaigns in the second game are particularly great, especially with the voice-acted, hand-drawn pre- and post-game cutscenes. Whenever I finally get around to Age of Empires 4, I'll absolutely be reviewing it on this channel. Number 4. In terms of role-playing games, nothing beats Fallout. If Dragon Age had more games matching the caliber of the first game, that series would be on this list too, but Fallout just has a consistently higher bar of quality. I personally love the Interplay games more than the Bethesda ones, but Fallout 4 is a good bit of fun. I do wish New Vegas would have been closer to the Van Buren game in development, but it does a great job of following the end of Fallout 2 that I can forgive it being a little less fun to play. My favorite game in the franchise is absolutely the first game, with 2 following close behind. CRPGs from that era of the 90s weren't scared to provide the player with real moral quandaries in the same way they are now. Part of why Bethesda's stewardship of the series hasn't always been the best is because of how they've shifted the series away from its more real-feeling roots into something that's a bit more zany. I don't necessarily hate that, but I do wish we would get a Fallout game more in line with the first game. It may be controversial, but I actually kinda like elements of Brotherhood of Steel, even though that game is definitely a major departure from the series' roots. I miss the way gaming franchises in the early 2000s would have non-canon spin-off games in different genres. If there's one thing I wish would come back from the 6th generation, it would be that. Number 3. Resident Evil games used to be family games when I was growing up. What I mean is that my father would play the game and my brothers and I would watch and discuss while he played. This is where my love of single-player couch co-op experiences comes from, and Resident Evil is absolutely the best franchise for these types of game sessions. I most certainly have not played every single game in this franchise, but that's because there's just so damn many. I have played every mainline entry and a handful of the spin-offs. My favorite is RE2 Remake, and RE1 Remake is a close second place. I'm not really into speedrunning, but I do like learning how to quickly get through RE games for the completion rewards, and I really want Capcom to port 1998's RE2 and Nemesis to modern consoles, because even though I love the remakes of the first 4 games, I really want to be able to play the originals as well without needing to bust out my PS3. Number 2, and the penultimate entry on this top 10 is Mortal Kombat. I have loved the series ever since I watched the 1995 film at an early age. The first game I played in the series was the Genesis port of the first game, and after that I would get Deception and play that to death. To this date, Deception is my favorite game in the franchise, and even though I also like the NRS era of MK, it always feels like a raw deal with the way they consistently favor arcade era characters and lore over the 3D era. I know a lot of the characters introduced in the 3D era are a little milquetoast, but the lore of that era is the best the series has ever seen. Even though MK is absolutely not the most competitive fighter on the market, I still love the gameplay of the series. There needs to be at least one major fighting game that is not specifically designed with Evo in mind, and MK has always been that for me. Crazy combos and gory finishers are the bread and butter of this series, and that's what keeps bringing me back for more. And before we get to my number 1 pick, I've got one honorable mention to talk about. I love Alien games, as in the Alien franchise games. I nearly put this on my list, but I wanted to focus on gaming franchises specifically, rather than a movie franchise with game spin-offs. Alien Isolation is the best of these games, but the Turn of the Millennium AVP duology is near and dear to my heart, and ever since the last one came out in 2010, I've wanted another AVP game to play through. I would settle for Night Dive remastering the 2 AVP games, to be honest with you, and with the way they've been working through the back catalog of shooters from the 90s, I wouldn't be shocked if they actually got around to doing that. And with that, let's move on to my favorite gaming franchise. Number 1. My favorite gaming franchise by a wide margin is Final Fantasy. Tactics is my favorite game of all time, and at this point in time, 19 games from this franchise pepper my various top 100 lists, making it the series that shows up the most often out of any other that exists. This franchise has so many games that I definitely haven't gotten around to all of the spin-offs, but I'm planning to rectify that by the end of next year. I'll be starting 11 and a challenge run of 7 soon. Sakaguchi's stewardship of the series is peak Final Fantasy, and while I don't like the newer titles as much as the older ones, I do find there's a lot of great things in the modern era. I do hope 17 returns to a more classic style for the series, but I'm also perfectly okay with the action gameplay of 16 and such. This series just has some of the greatest plots, most interesting worlds, and dynamic characters in gaming history. Spira and Ivalice don't have anything that compares to them inside and outside of the series, and for most of the series' history, I like the balance Final Fantasy has had between mainline installments and spin-offs. Of all the franchises on this list, Final Fantasy has been the most successful in this way without losing their core identity. And even though there are definitely some fans that don't like the modern action-heavy games, to me, they all feel like Final Fantasy. And that's the video, my guys. What's your favorite gaming franchise? Let me know in the comment section below, and while you're there, smash that like button and ring the notification bell. And if you have a moment right now, consider checking out one of my other videos on the screen. Regardless of what you choose to do, thank you for keeping it real with Rayl Deal Games. Have an awesome day, gamers.